Hey team, welcome to the Football Feast podcast. I'm your host, Craig Evans, and over the next 6 episodes, we'll be diving deep into what it takes for young players to become an elite footballer. Every fortnight, I'll be sitting down with experts from the world of football, agents, coaches, nutritionists, and more, to give you insider tips, advice, and strategies to make those football dreams a reality. On this episode, I have Dr. Maria Aramburu. Dr. Maria is a board-certified pediatrician, former medical director at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital, and she's a pioneer in adolescent mental health. Some of the things we talked about in this episode are: how does mental health impact the performance and development of youth athletes? How can parents recognize the signs of mental health? How can young athletes manage the pressure to perform on and off the field? And how much pressure is good? Strategies parents and coaches can use. We also discuss the social media ban to 16 years of age in Australia, and much, much more. I really enjoyed this chat with Dr. Maria and truly believe this is an episode that is a must listen for all parents out there. Enjoy. So we're on episode 11 of the Football Feast podcast. This is episode 3 of the Future Stars series. Today I've got Dr. Maria Aramburu. If you want to say hi, Doctor.
Thanks for having me.
Beautiful. Thank you for jumping on and stopping by and having this chat with me. I think a lot of parents are definitely going to get a lot out of this. I know this is one that I was really looking forward to, and I think mental health is really important, and especially that stage of life as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me all the way from the US to Australia.
Yeah, no problem. So to kick things off, so what inspired you to sort of focus on adolescent mental health and pediatric care?
Absolutely. Great question. So, I went to medical school. I always thought about pediatrics as a potential specialty. Obviously, after, 7 years of med school, you always kind of want to explore other options. So I did go into adult medicine and other parts of pediatrics within the hospital. But in 2013, actually, my brother was 18 and he had a terrible car accident where he actually passed away with his 3 of his best friends. And we started a nonprofit in Panama just to commemorate his memory, and it was focused on helping teens achieve their best potential. So even before going to residency for pediatrics, I was working with teens in Panama, where I'm from originally. And that really was something because he, died in his teen years. And I felt like, his message was to kind of help other teens achieve their max potential, which was what he did, with his friends. So that started it. And then when I went to residency, I went to Washington, D.C., Georgetown University Hospital for my pediatrics residency. I had some great mentors in adolescent medicine. We published some papers. We were doing some studies already in Panama on, STD and HIV prevention. I got to publish those, present those at a conference, and I just got inspired in the world of adolescent medicine because if you think about specialties in pediatrics, all specialties, they see a part of the body. So it's going to be like GI, it's going to be like pulmonology. You see the lungs, you see the gut. But adolescent medicine, you're really specialized because there's a lot of issues that are particular to adolescents, but you're actually seeing the whole person. And I always wanted to see the whole person. So I actually didn't go straight into the fellowship of adolescent medicine. I actually did a fellowship in community pediatrics and child advocacy, and a master's in public health that was after the 3 years of pediatrics residency. So I did that fellowship first, and I landed in this part of my fellowship was creating a program. So if you do a needs assessment, see what the community needs. And the program that I created was a school-based health center. So I wrote a grant for funding with DC Health to fund a clinic inside a high school. So we got the grant, and when I came back from maternity leave, because I was having my second baby at the time, they asked me to be medical director for this clinic. So I ended up like kind of gravitating towards the world of adolescents, because then as medical director of the school-based health center that I had helped fund, I worked primarily with teens. And
Mm.
in that role, I noticed the great need for mental health services in pediatrics and especially with teens. So I actually pursued further training in mental health for pediatrics. So I did a small fellowship where they taught us how to do psychopharmacology and short CBT. I worked with psychiatrists, and that's how I got my training in teen mental health. Now, I worked for 10 years there. Now I'm in Pennsylvania, and when I moved here, because of my background, I was hired to work in a division of adolescent medicine in particular, with a great mentor who trained me in like whatever else I needed in terms of adolescent medicine. So he trained me for the past 2 years to really kind of like specialize in adolescent medicine, almost like doing a fellowship. So that's where I'm at. That's my path.
Wow. Wow. That's an incredible path. Yeah, so much to touch on there. But
Oh,
when
and
you
I missed
created,
something. I
oh,
actually went to Australia. This is very important for you because you're there. When I presented my research project when I was in residency and I presented that in Seattle, this doctor approached me and she was like, you seem like you have great interest for adolescent medicine. That's a great project. I would love to have you in my clinic whenever you would like for a rotation. And I was like, oh, where's your clinic? And she was like, Melbourne Children's Hospital. So she actually invited me to work with her in Melbourne, Australia, at the Children's Hospital, and I did go in 2010 for a whole month
right.
to
Wonderful.
work
What
with.
did you think? What did you think?
I love Australia. I was gonna stay, but then my husband went over there, proposed, and brought me back.
So he stole you from us.
He was like, "No way, I need to propose because she loves it too much." I really liked it. Yeah,
Oh, we nearly had you.
yeah,
That's
never too
fantastic.
late. Maybe I'll go back.
Very
It's good.
nice.
It's a great place.
Yeah, so can you touch on what was it like opening up that clinic in the school? So obviously you opened that up, and did you really notice that, people needed a lot of help there, and it was really a place where you were making a lot of impact?
Absolutely, absolutely. What happens with teens is it's a weird stage because parents feel like maybe they no longer need to go to the pediatrician for the yearly checkups. So what are they going to talk about? It's weird. And a lot of teens do shy away from it. But having a clinic in their high school with a doctor they trust, with the caveat that we can provide confidential services, parents have to sign consent for us to see them on their own. And explaining that, we can treat you for anything that you might be embarrassed to talk about with someone else, and we can take care of you because your health is important. That was huge. We did have a high immigrant population, so for that aspect, it was huge. There were some teens that were here without their parents, had
Mm.
immigrated from like Latin America into the US and then positioned in DC. So they didn't have care, they didn't have insurance. So for that population, it was huge. And then for the other teens that were, inner city, we found instances of like teens being trafficked. We had substance uses. We had diagnosis of PTSD where kids hadn't opened up to their parents about like traumatic experiences that had happened in their childhood, but they were struggling with their mental health now, and digging in this confidential space. So having an adolescent-centered clinic anywhere, it doesn't have to be in the high school, but the low barrier access is huge. So I think in terms of initiatives, that's a great initiative that the US government has had with the DC Department of Health, and other states have it. So having school-based health centers is really has shown to improve outcomes in teens.
Yeah, wow. So, so is that quite common? Do a lot of schools have these health centers?
It's a movement here in the US. I would say here in Pennsylvania, there's less, I mean, proportional to the population because this state is huge. But in
Mm.
DC, for the small state that it was, there was seven. So that was big. So almost all public schools in the District of Columbia had these. And they actually used some tax funding for the grants. So they used like the cigarette tax to fund these grants. So that was smart because it's something that's hurting people. Use it for something that's helping people. I thought that was a good thing.
Yeah, cool. I like hearing that. I like hearing when they do tax things like that and use it
Yeah.
wisely once.
If they're gonna buy it anyway, might as well use the money.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. That's so intriguing. I mean, because there'd be so many kids through those teenage years, like, and like you said, like they go through a traumatic experience, and then when they get to the teenage years, if they didn't have that opportunity or that clinic there, they don't really have someone to turn to, or if they do, it's harder to reach that person, and that might deter them from actually doing it or even taking that lead.
Exactly. Or it can be later. Usually these things is good when you identify them earlier. And usually kids
Mm.
would come for like, say they come for an STD or they're worried about a discharge or something more private, but then they realize, hey, they can also help me with my mental health. So it's kind of like catch them where they need and where the need is. So be there for when the need comes up. And sometimes they would go with a headache or a bellyache to the nurse. The school nurse was right next to us. And then she'll be like, this is something more. And she can send them to us and escalate the problem. But we can do a whole episode on school-based health centers. That's a huge topic. So we can do that one
Yeah,
next.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's touch on sort of mental health and how it would impact the performance and development of like youth athletes.
Absolutely. So, as well as physical health, mental health is something that we need to maintain. And it's surprising to me to see like all of the Olympians and the documentaries that are coming out now, seeing that that wasn't something that was addressed and that it was taboo. So you see a lot of the Olympians coming out. It's like our mental health is important. And, when athletes start going in that path of professional, endeavors, it should be established. Now, there's many kids that are just doing athletics, and I think that's a great thing. It's so good for their health. It's actually good for their mental health, just keeping them active and having that passion for sports will help them through the teenage years because if you see an athlete is someone that's gonna, choose healthier options because they need to wake up early in the morning to work out. They want to nourish their bodies. They know that how important that is. They felt the impact. And all of this affects the mental health. But there's the other side of the coin where, the pressures of athletics can get also affect your self-esteem, your thinking, and your negatively affect your mental health. So it's important for us to basically prioritize looking into how to support the mental health of our athletes early. And there's many ways we can do this. But first of all, just maintaining these open channels of communication on like in terms of like what you could feel and how that could be normal and like we all have failures and this is not going to define us and how we get up from that. So the first line is the conversations, and then, kind of keeping an eye, but, in terms of like the two aspects of it, like the regular athletics and the ones that are going into, very stringent competitive environments, then there should be someone that they can talk to and someone that can actually be a professional that's really addressing these things with them early on.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And yeah, I've definitely noticed there's a lot more sports psychologists that are being spoken about and working with teams and working with athletes these days. And one thing I actually wanted to talk to you about is like I do know that there's meant to be like some pressure's good, right? Especially in a sporting situation, and I believe that creates growth or promotes growth, or overcoming challenges is a good thing, but too much is a bad thing. And then I've heard that there's something called the flow state. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Which is like in between or something like that. And
in
that's what
between.
athletes are
Yeah.
going to aim for.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So basically it kind of emulates life, right? In terms of like toxic stress and the healthy amount of stress where you feel the pressure, you feel the anxiety because anxiety can be a healthy emotion that you need to do certain things, push you to do certain things to perform. So obviously we don't want them to be to relax and be like, oh, I don't need to train. I'm so good. I just, wake up and do this. We want them to have that pressure of like, what are the things I need to do to get to the place that I want to go? One of the things that I say is always having this mentor figure that checks in with your child. It can be a coach, it can be the sibling, it can be a cousin, an uncle, someone that checks in, because sometimes we assume a lot and we are pushing our kids like they're going to be professionals and like they only really want to have fun, right? And that's okay. Because as you know, as an athlete and a coach, they the kids that are necessarily doing well right now, it doesn't mean that necessarily it's going to be later, and things change. And what is the most important things to maintain them in the sport is for them to be enjoying it and having fun. And kids, actually, their brain is wired to learn better and consolidate knowledge better when they're actually having fun. Once the pressure gets too high or the stress gets too high, the fun goes away. So say, you're in a team and then they're kind of like saying, you need to push yourself harder or you're gonna get cut out. Oh, you're so bad, you're gonna go to the lower team or something like that. That's gonna crush a child's self-esteem. So instead, using a growth mindset. Hey, what are your goals in this team? Do you want to stay in the more competitive realm or do you want to just have fun? Because if you want to have fun, this other team is great for fun, but in this team we need a higher level, right? What are your goals? Okay, write them down. Okay, for these goals, this is what you need to do. Instead of telling them like you're not doing X and Y, Z, you're kind of looking bad, you're gonna go down. That can crush them. And a teen that might have a child that might have had 10 more years in the sport maybe gives up. So it's this fine balance. And yes, with stress, the kind of stress that is just kind of small spurts, isolated, and with the supportive figure in place, like someone that they can talk about this and process this with, is healthy. And that's kind of like the state of flow that we were talking about. And then the toxic is just every day, someone pushing them and kind of like being like, push harder. That's not good enough. You're not good enough. Important in that is when a coach or someone that's helping with training is addressing the child or the teen, what are they using? Are they talking about the person or are they talking about the behavior? Because you say, that push-up wasn't good enough. You need to push harder. Or you're so weak. What's going on with your muscles? You're not strong. Why are you, then you're qualifying the person. You're talking about the athlete. So you are affecting their self-esteem, their image, and their internal thought process about themselves. That's not a growth mindset. They feel like, okay, maybe I'm weak. I'm not strong. I'm not seeing what I can do to get stronger versus, hey, that push-up was weak. You need to maybe once a day do this and that to get stronger in your arms, for example. So always giving that next step, like what do I need to do that? Because there's so much growth that can happen. But if you classify an athlete or a person into like, you're short, you're tall, you're fat, you're talking about body, I mean, that can get, very tricky and it can get very negative in their brains very quick, very fast.
Yeah. One thing I like to try and do, and especially with my son actually, is I prefer to say, like, look at it as an opportunity to turn that into a strength. So if we do see a weakness or something that they did bad in, instead of pointing it out and saying, you did miserably or you missed that shot, terrible tackle today, you didn't catch that guy or he beat you. I try to turn it into, let's make that a strength now. So let's work on that. This is an opportunity to turn that into something good instead of highlighting it and putting it down. I feel like for me, I get better out of my son when I talk to him like that.
That's excellent. Yeah. And then in terms of like winning and losing, that's the hardest. And I definitely don't have an expertise in that, but I feel like that affects the mental health. Like, are they okay with like losing a game? And their role in that, like if they're the ones that didn't score the goal or they're the ones that didn't catch protect the ball, how they're gonna feel about their team losing.
Yeah.
Right. emphasizing that team dynamics and how everybody plays a role, and it's not never just one person. It's the first one. And the second one is for losing okay, we either win or we learn, right? When we
Oh, I
lose, we
like
learn.
that.
Yeah. So yeah, when we lose, we learn. What do we learn? What we can do better for next time. But that takes like, they're not gonna believe you the first time. They're gonna be really sad about losing. So it's kind of like that consistency of saying that and then emulating that in our lives, right? They don't believe us because we're trying to give them a speech or tell them something. So it's kind of like trying to figure out ways that in our lives as parents we fail or we make a mistake or we drop the ball, and then pointing that out. Hey, I did this. I left the car on last night and it ran out of battery. So, instead of beating myself up for doing that, I learned that I have to check the car twice before whatever, something like that.
Mm.
So sharing that with them, because we sometimes parents feel the need that to portray themselves as, these perfect adult that got it all together, and we don't, you know, even though, we've been alive for many, many more years and we've made those mistakes, and portraying that to our kids so they know they can make mistakes too and safely share and not have the shame around it.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that insight. It's funny you say that because I was at a tournament just this weekend, and I was watching my nephews play. And I don't know about the US setup, but we've got our club teams, they've got their state teams, they've got these academy setups, and these academies have pretty hardcore training, and then on the weekends they play these big tournament games.
Hmm.
But I was standing there and I was sort of watching the kids, and there's parents yelling things, and the coaches sort of telling the parents to stop. The referees were taking a little bit of abuse during the game. And I noticed even like my nephew, he played really well in the first game, but it seemed to try kind of drop off. And then one kid missed a penalty, started crying. And I took a moment to sort of look around, and I was actually just looking to see if they were having fun. And to be honest, I couldn't really see that. Like, I wasn't seeing children lit up faces. Like, there was the ones that won and they were happy, of course, but that's that's winning the trophy. Of course, they're going to be happy. But majority of the kids there, I was actually a little bit disappointed because I thought, they should be having fun. They're playing a sport and they're with friends and learning skills and improving.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit disappointing, to be honest. And I'm not sure if that environment was, I don't know, doing it right.
Absolutely. I agree with you. People, I mean, you would think that all the parents are trying to seek out this type of podcast to hear how to help with the kids' mental health. But they have maybe that intention in mind, but they lose track of that when they're like, oh, my child is good. Let me push them so they can get a scholarship or they can win this and they can go to the major, professional leagues and all of
Mm.
that. And sometimes the kids are asking for that, right? You have the kids that are very driven and they're like, Mom, I want to be professional, kind of like help me get there. But we are the ones, as they said, that we are their frontal lobe. We are their guiding brain till age 25. So what we emulate is what they'll feel is real. So if we are, as parents, putting the pressure on, getting very disappointed when they commit a mistake in the field and just celebrating the wins, they're going to be sad and not enjoying when that's not happening. And that's
Right.
terrible, right? At some point they'll feel like a failure if they don't get there. And then they'll be like sitting in a couch drinking the soda and like everything, all of that they built in these childhood years, in the teenage years will be like that, versus you created this passion, this love for the sport, this addiction to the sport that doesn't matter if you don't make it to the professional, you're still gonna be like with your friends doing a little league and having fun because that's your livelihood. That's what keeps you happy because you remember and you have that feeling of that passion. Doesn't matter that you didn't go pro, like you're gonna do your career as something else, but you're gonna go and have like this, group of professionals that play together soccer or something like that, and that's going to be your mental health relief, versus it becoming a mental health stressor because you didn't make it and that was it for you. That was, how many kids are going to make it to the professional? Like, that's a very low percentage. I don't have the numbers, but so we have to keep the goal in mind, and don't lose track of that. And I mean, my kids play sports. So I'm saying, I come from the perspective of having my patients that are athletes and my kids that are athletes. And it's hard because they define themselves by their wins or their like goals and stuff like that and compare each other. And we have to be the ones saying kind of like it's the effort that matters, not the outcome, and help them understand what that means because they don't. So it's like a
Yeah.
repetitive thing, us keeping our calm, our demeanor during the game, and what we talk about on the ride home. What are we
Yeah.
saying? The right to the game and the ride home. Those are the most important moments.
So on the ride home, would you highlight the positives first and then talk about some of the negatives and then end it on a positive, or how would you sort of recommend
That's
that?
that's great strategy because that's a feedback sandwich. The caveat is if they are extremely disappointed and sad, it might seem a little fake to just be like, but you did great. You were running so fast. And they're like, oh my God, like they're really disappointed. So I think it can go two ways. If the feeling is neutral, is do the feedback sandwich. Hey, I noticed you were really passing really well. You were doing this, you were doing that. So one of the things is that is a previous effort, right? Paying attention during the game and catching some positives. A lot of parents just catch the negatives. It happens. It's happened to us as well. Like, oh my God, he was doing this, he was doing that. And they tend to criticize their own kids. I've seen it a lot. I see them walking to the car and they're like, oh my God, you could have done better, you could have done this, you could have done that. And they're criticizing. So definitely if you keep in mind the feedback sandwich, positive, point out what they could have done better, positives, that's a great baseline strategy. The second option is empathize with their feelings, like just validate the feelings. Like, yeah, that must be so frustrating. That must be so hard, so sad, like, and then like, thank you for sharing with me. That's important. Your feelings matter. Like that their feelings matter, that they can be sad, that they can be frustrated. And then that doesn't define you. Like
Mm.
that must be frustrating also because you made such an effort, because you've been training hard. But that's the nature of the sport. It always happens. You train and then something happens. But thanks to your training, probably you were able to do this and that and the other. And then next time, maybe you guys can blah, blah, blah. So pointing out
Yeah.
like if they're disappointed, yes, because they didn't do that well as they were expecting based on all their training or whatever they're doing. But then we see the effort. So we can try to, I'm sure there was something positive that they did during the game that they totally erased because our brain is trained to go towards the negative. And if we let a child stay there for anything in life, it can be academics, it can be relationships, friendships, whatever. Their brain will gravitate towards stories that are usually negative about themselves. So we are the only ones that can actually demystify those stories or teach them about, we can teach them about thoughts and how they come into our brain and all that. But that's, very more advanced, like if you are always talking to your kids and you go there. But if you're just guiding them in the moment, it's kind of like putting in some positives, sprinkling some positives into the negative. And sometimes it
Yeah.
won't be well by them, right? But we have to stay the course, maybe talk the next day as well.
Right. So, yeah. Okay. So let's say a kid did terrible, really bad, and you want to let them know. How should a parent deal with that? Should they basically be like, you missed that shot today. Uh, you know, it, you should like, a bit disappointed you missed that shot today, but hey, let's go work on that this week. Could you do that? Could you
Yeah, I
use it as a
think
way to?
I think I would the one thing that I would change about that's great. Sounds good because you're using as you said, what they didn't get right to build it as a strength. I loved that you do that with your son. But sometimes curiosity goes a longer way. So kind of being like, hey, how do you feel about today? What do you think? What do you feel, frustrated about if you see the frustration, right? So you can start also with the feedback sandwich, like, hey, I saw you did some great passes, blah, blah, like not talk about the outcome, like stay away from the outcome, which is like you lost the game. So that you can start talking about like a little detail that you noticed that was something good in the game. And if they are really frustrated about the outcome, they'll be like, no, shut up, I played terrible. You didn't see when I like missed the goal, the shot, and then you'll be like, yeah, I saw that, that must have been really disappointing for you. And then kind of like, how do you feel about it? And just kind of getting some feelings out of them. And they might say, I'm so bad or something. If they start qualifying themselves based on that, that's when you come in and it's like, the one shot or that game doesn't define you. Like the effort that you've been making, adds up to the moments where you have the victories. But when right now you want to work on that, let's work on that this weekend. How can I support you with that? So sometimes it's more like asking them, because sometimes we impose a lot of things and they can become defensive. And it also depends on the age. So we have to look at developmental stages. So it would be good, yeah, to have like a little guide on like how you can approach this depending on the developmental stages. But in general, it's kind of coming at it from a place of curiosity and letting them express. So then there we can hear where they're coming from, because sometimes we saw something terrible and they didn't even notice they did it. So why point it out? Because already they're their hardest critics, I feel.
Yeah, that's interesting. So basically, you're suggesting to let them basically tell you or them to work it out. You're sort of leading them down that path without stating what they've done wrong, and then finding out if they've realized it. Because I suppose they're almost solving it themselves, aren't they then? And you're letting them
Yes,
come up with the problem and then probably thinking about their own solution, or you could even ask them that. Is that right? Like, how would you do
that's
better next
correct.
time? Or
That's exactly what we're doing. It's called motivational interviewing. So it's kind of like being curious, saying less, and offering and being there for sure, but helping them come up with their own answers, because that's is where they're building their neuronal connections. Like,
Mm,
okay, I have a problem, and how do I fix it? And then if they ask for help, like, I don't know what I can do. I mean, I just don't know how I can improve that. Then we like, is it okay if I offer a suggestion?
yeah, because I suppose if we hammer them, like if I just say to my son or say to like if I say I don't do this, but if I say to him, "Hey, like that was terrible today. You did a bad job," you're not really helping, are you? You're just putting them down and not letting them solve it themselves. You're telling them. Um, Whereas you're saying to let them figure it out, them to work out their own solution, and then that way they've sort of come to that themselves. And then, yeah, then we've not got the negative thing on top of that of me, the father figure or role model, putting them down as well.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes there might be something that they're going through in their whatever sport of their preferences, and they haven't noticed that deficiency in themselves. So what can we do in that instance? In that instance, I would say we can find ways of helping them with that deficiency. We feel like it's important for you then not to like then notice and then be affected in self-esteem. And then indirectly, without telling them that it's a problem. Like, for example, talking to the coach and being like, hey, can you give them extra drills in this? Because I noticed that he's not running that fast, right? Or, hey, let's do some strength training at home. Um, you know, whatever works for whatever the child is struggling with that we're seeing. But if we point it out right away, we're putting that in their brains. Maybe that wasn't even there. There definitely gonna be enough negative things in their brain. But as I said, this is how the child's brain works. It's still developing, and it usually will create negative stories about themselves. That's why they say like sometimes it's not about the big T, the big trauma. It's like the small T, this accumulation of the small trauma. So like in any topic of life, something happened and, in their childhood, and talking about like body image, for example. Somebody was over there and they were saying something about the child, and it was like, oh, they're chubby or something like that. And the child heard that. If there's not a conversation about that to clarify, the child might stay with the story in their head where they're I'm fat, I'm overweight, and whatever, and it's not even a real thing, but they get into that role and then they become that, they actually go that path. Like, okay, if I'm fat, then might as well just eat the Oreos. That's how the brain tricks you. So it's important to demystify the stories that kids have in their head. And the only way to do that is actually having the conversation and they come out. And you're like, oh, really? You thought that? Okay, no, let's talk about that. How is that not true or not a fact or not, just a belief, for example?
Wow, that's pretty interesting. Very good. There's heaps more that I'd love to dig into there, but we'll keep running, or else I'll keep you too long. All right. So, how can parents recognize signs of mental health struggles in young athletes?
Absolutely. I would say, in particular with athletes, so it's important for parents to be informed in general what the symptoms are of mental health. So the first two for me is sleep and appetite. I always ask about sleep and appetite. So if they're starting to like have trouble falling asleep or waking up at night, or unable to wake up in the morning, they're fatigued during the day, those are signs that something else could be going on. And then if they lose their appetite or they have too much of an appetite. So changes in those two things are red flags for mental health. And then losing interest in things that they were very interested in. So for example, they're like no longer motivated. They don't want to go to practice. They're, kind of like skipping out, or, oh, I feel sick. I have a bellyache. Those are definitely red flags, because if they're passionate about a sport, why would they all of a sudden stop losing interest? It doesn't necessarily
Mm.
mean that they're depressed or they're anxious, but it could be something little that's going on. The coach is being mean, the kids are bullying them, or they're rejecting him or something like that, or her. So we would want to look into that. And then the other symptoms is like constant worries, jitteriness, irritability, just being easily annoyed. Those are all symptoms of kind of like depression and anxiety. So that's why I say sometimes like anger, you know, like, oh, I don't know why they're always angry and biting at me and all that. And then it's like, well, maybe that's a sign of something else that's underneath. What if that's like anxiety, or what if that's like just them worried or self-conscious or in a shame, or anything like that. Sometimes we can catch something early when it's starting before it becomes like a clinical concern, but we should pay attention to those red flags. And then just kind of like, if you see one, then keep an eye for other red flags, right? So that would be the way that they can. And then always checking in with a third party. So as parents, we're biased. Like, I'm a pediatrician, but I don't like to check my kids. Like, I take them somewhere and it's like, what do you think? You know? So just kind of having a low threshold for taking them in and checking, because all of these mental health ailments, I'll say, when your mental health is getting affected, if you treat it early, you could catch it subclinical and you can address it fast. Sometimes kids have fallen in what I was mentioning, it's a negative thinking cycle, and they're there. And when you're in the negative thinking cycle, you look for evidence of those negative thoughts in your environment, and you're always going to find it. Whatever you're
Mm.
looking for is what you're going to find. So then that would be a path towards depression, right? If your life seems negative and everything's not going right, you're gonna be further into depression at some point in that. So if you catch that at that point, you can prevent something. Obviously, if there's some kind of trauma in the past or something that comes out, then that can be dealt with before also subclinical. And actually, we did do a study on that, and we found like a high percentage of kids that were actually subclinical that have had traumatic experiences for a while. So that's a good window of opportunity.
Right. So if they've had that traumatic experience, do we need to like see you guys to intervene as soon as possible, obviously? Is that right?
Definitely, definitely. I feel like sometimes as adults, we might minimize an experience that could affect
Mm,
a kid years later. So like I had a patient that was like, oh, this happened. And like the teacher kind of like ignored the fact that, Johnny almost drowned me. And I felt like I was drowning and it was for 1 minute. And this is just on the top of my mind because it was a patient that I had yesterday. I'm changing the names to keep confidentiality, but, um, I was seeing her now for like behaviors with teachers where she like kicked a chair and threw it at a teacher, and there's a lot of anger towards teachers. And in our session, it came out that 3 years ago, Johnny fell on her and almost drowned her. And when she came out, where she was like, I almost died and felt like maybe everybody was going to be rushing her out and taking care of her, the teacher said, just keep on swimming, kind of like suck it up. And to this day, she didn't drown. She was healthy afterwards. She was okay. But the psychological component of the teacher not caring, the teacher like really telling her just kind of like keep pushing through and swim, it was disvalidating. And she felt unheard or unseen, disvalidated. And all this time, that has affected her relationship with all teachers because she feels at this point teachers don't care. Teachers don't care about your safety. You could die in front of their eyes and they don't care. Like, this was the idea that her brain gave her because of that situation. And of course, when she told the parents that they wanted to see her safety, like, are her lungs okay? Is she feeling okay? But it's hard to think about like the psychological component of that. Um, so it's more like, when they did the right thing, they seeked for help with me, and I was able to like, I'm a new person, and she's telling the story, and I'm like, that's so hard. That must have been so hard. But then, kind of like realizing how these two are connected now.
yeah. Wow, that's really, really interesting. I
That
have a
was
question.
really
So, yeah, so when something happens to a child, is it much bigger to them? So like an event, like is that, I think you were sort of getting to that. So something that happens to us adults, we may see it as minor, but for a child, is it much bigger? I've sort of heard that their world, because their world's a bit smaller, that like, they know less people or they've been to less places and stuff like that. So perhaps something happening in that world has a bigger effect. Is that true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like their whole world is this. So if something happens there, it's like very scary and big.
Mm.
Say you're in the house and there's like a fire alarm goes off. It's like you're like, oh, just turn it off. But they might be like, is the house gonna go on fire? Like they imagine like everything because this house is their world. And they haven't lived through like, how many times does a false alarm go off and it's nothing, right? They haven't lived through that. So in that moment, all these wires get connected. And if you don't sit down and be like, have a conversation like, hey, this was fine. Like sometimes these things trip and it's nothing. And that's why we're here as adults to take care of you and figure these things out. Give them that sense of safety. They might stay in that fight or flight, kind of like, I don't know. I literally remember one day that my dad was like, "Hi, can you stand there and take care of the car?" And we're gonna be inside in the store. And I was like, very much my role was like to take care of the car, and they better not steal it. And also we live in this world where like bad things can happen. And then I was standing there, and the car next to my car somebody got on it and started pulling, and I thought it was our car, and I was like, oh my God, they're stealing the car. And like you go into the fight or flight of it, right? Like if you imagine that situation happening. And then my parents came out, they're like, no, that was the other car, like nothing happened, just brushed it off and we left. I was like for 2 hours, like my heart was beating fast. I was sweating because in that moment, literally was like, I need to save the car. And this is my whole world, this car, right? And even if they were stealing the car, it shouldn't have been like my responsibility, but it felt huge. It felt like I had to literally take care of this car.
Yeah.
And we're more once the kid goes into a fight or flight, this can reflect in other circumstances. So we have to like really clear the air, I would say, for them as adults. So it's an important role.
Yeah, wow. That's huge. And I think a lot of parents don't realize that too. And I'm really glad you spoke on that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a huge
all right.
thing.
So what strategies can parents and coaches use to foster a supportive, low stress environment?
Absolutely. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about, right? Make sure they're having fun. I think if you keep that goal in mind, everything else is okay. Like they're still gonna go practice and spend the hours training, and it's still gonna get the outcomes that you want, but with a much lower push and effect on their mental health. So, like, what you did was great. You observed your environment, you connected with the emotions of what was happening. We, as parents, I mean, we're dealing with a lot of things, and then we're going to these games, and we're like, I want my kid to get playtime. I want my kid to do good. I want my kid to win. Like we get into it. We buy into that. And we have to step back. If we only have the goal of them having fun, then that's like we're being transparent about that. They feel that they get permission to have fun, because sometimes if we're focused on the outcome, that permission to have fun goes away because they have to really, work hard, or they're scared of what you're going to say when they get in the car and if I didn't make enough effort. So validating the effort for coaches and for parents, like if you're in a practice and you see them, you know, just kind of slacking off or something, well, they're not making an effort. But like when they are, pointing that out, and then that way that translates to games. Like, what matters is that you were training, you're putting the time in, you're putting the effort in, and you're having fun. And this is what matters to me. And I hope this is what matters to you. And then for the coaches too, like when they're doing their little sessions and their pep talks, kind of like honing that in. I have, my kids are like in a team for the club soccer, but I realized there was like this more of a, it's getting more competitive, there's more pressure. But last year there was this coach that was really connecting with them, and they have fun and they were doing so well with him. And he's not their coach now, but I called him over. I was like, hey, can we do a once a week session with you, but more like for the self-esteem and the fun of it. Um, and I actually included other friends that are not at that level that they are, so that it would be actually fun and not about the level.
Mm.
But I wanted them to focus on like stretching and conditioning, because sometimes you're like in the trainings, they're just doing all the playing. And then I was noticing like these muscle aches and stuff like that. So also like caring for our bodies, seeing that part, like sometimes, I don't know, it should be part of the training, but sometimes you see like even in gymnastics, it's like this pushing through, and it's like, how about like the stretching and the massages and the relaxing, like a hot bath, like taking care of our muscles, like the nourishment, like bringing all of that in, um is important. So that also helps the stress of the stress environment, like having those other outlets where the actual sport you can have fun, or like if there's a parent that likes the sport and they can just like dribble around, play fun, have fun with it. That's another way of helping that. So kind of encouraging those little things.
Yeah, it's funny. I like how you pointed out about a coach there, and your children, because I feel like everyone I know or everyone I've spoken to that's played a sport, we always have that, like at least that one coach where we had that year or a couple of years with that coach, and you really enjoyed it. You remember playing with a smile on your face. You probably played your best soccer, football, and it always seemed to be sort of surrounding that fun when you're having the best time and your smile's on and someone's bringing that to life. And I think that's a really good thing for coaches if they watch this. Yeah, like they are a role model and they're a pivotal key into the child's, I guess, psyche and their game and their performance. And I feel like, when we are smiling, when we are having fun, that's probably when you're going to get the best performance out of us. Um, yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah, cool. So why is reducing stigma around mental health so critical and particularly for athletes?
Excellent question. So the stigma, I mean, is huge. Even, I've talked to my kids about mental health, like, and they're like, is that a thing? Like, what? And I'm like, well, have you ever been sad? And I guess they were like, no. I'm like, okay, great. You've had a great life. But I was trying to explain to them how, like, the brain is an organ in our body, and it's like diabetes when your pancreas stop working and it's not producing insulin. Like your brain also like gets tired and it gets fatigued, and then you can go into this and it's not like shake it off or just snap out of it. It's actually a physical thing that's happening that you can't snap out of it. So the stigma, reducing the stigma, I think, is classifying as a medical thing. So it's like if you have like even the most embarrassing thing for like boys, say like your testicle hurts. Like if your testicle hurts, you're gonna go seek help for that, even though it's embarrassing to talk about your private parts, right? Well, same thing. Like if we talk about the brain and somebody being ill with their mental health and what that meant, that they have to go to the doctor and they help them and then they got better, then I think that reduces the stigma. Why is it important? Because if you reduce the stigma, you increase the likelihood that a child or a teen will seek help. If it's something about me that I didn't do, that I needed to shake it off, or I needed to just be happy or just be normal, I'm gonna feel shame and I might hide that. And it happens with eating disorders, which we can have another episode about eating disorders, but it happens with eating disorders. Sometimes they're very good at hiding this for a long time.
Mm,
um, because it's very shameful. And with the way I take them out of that shame, it's explaining that it's something that your brain is doing to you. Your brain falls into this pattern and it's tricking you and telling you. It's like almost like having a bully inside your brain. With eating disorders, like you literally have like these thoughts, and it's almost like a person telling you, "Don't eat. You're fat. You're disgusting." It's becomes like that. And once you separate the eating disorder from the child or the teen, they're much more able to talk about it, even to their parents. Because, if I tell you like, I didn't eat, I am, just restricting my intake because I want to be skinny. I run the risk of you getting mad at me for doing that. So it's me. But if I've already gone to Dr. Maria and she explained these two separate things, they start telling their mom, the eating disorders giving me these thoughts again. It's telling me not to eat. It's telling me that I'm disgusting. I'm hearing these voices, but the voices are like our own thoughts, right? So wouldn't that be easier if you are able to say that this other person making you do this versus you yourself doing it? That's
mm.
huge for kids. They don't want to get in trouble. So that's how we reduce the stigma. Explain that it's their brain and not themselves, and that if they ever have thoughts of not wanting to be here, or feeling like a burden, feeling like why am I even alive, things like that, like that's their brain when it's really really sad, and you need to share that because there's ways of helping that.
Yeah, wow. I'm really enjoying this chat. How can schools and sports organizations promote mental health awareness?
Yeah, so schools and sports organizations. So, I feel like in schools they're starting to do a better job of integrating that into the curriculum. But I think it should be a constant, and it should be recurrent. So at different stages, just having that conversation in, why would you do if you feel like that? Why would you feel like that? With sports organization, it's super important because it should be like, here, we are a team, we're working hard. At some point, one of us is gonna feel a certain way. It's gonna be so sad or so low energy or so, a negative thought process coming. Like I was talking about the things, how they could present, and then what to do, and explaining that help is there, like talk to your coach about it. Like, this is normal. And then normalizing it, like maybe as a coach, the coach could share something that happened to them related to their mental health. But, this is something that's hard because it's kind of like showing a vulnerability, right? But if a coach is able to show a vulnerability to their students, to their athletes, then they will be able to show that vulnerability. So for sports associations, it would be good to kind of like have trainings for coaches in mental health and have them do the support, because I think it's unrealistic to think my ideal would be like each team would have a therapist, right, on staff. And it would be like, hey, this is this person. These are the things that you might feel, think, or whatever. Like same, like they put sometimes trainer for like injuries, for physical injuries, and they have someone like, if you're feeling pain, if you're feeling this balance, you go to this person in the practice and they help you through. It should be the same. But obviously that's gonna be, that's really hard with budgets, and it's not prioritized, unfortunately. So it would be more like helping the coaches have that low threshold and have that vulnerability with their students to talk about that, and then go from there, knowing what the resources are, when to seek for help. But it's really important. And I've seen like all the documentaries about these professional Olympic athletes and the things that they've struggled with without having any help in these, very, professional, well-funded teams. That's why I think like it should be a thing. It should be a thing, and they think so too. They've been promoting that. They've been talking about that, like the Michael Phelps, all the other, like, there's some tennis athletes and gymnastic athletes that have been talking about that.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot bigger now. Like I remember growing up when I was a kid, and we were just told to toughen up or just get on with
Toughen
it,
up.
sort of thing. Yeah, toughen up was definitely thrown around a few times. But I love actually like the zones. I don't know if you guys have the color zones over there, but like our children at our schools, they've got like, if I'm in the blue zone, if I'm in the red zone, if I'm in the orange zone, I feel this way. So it's been really good. So like my son, again, he'll tell me sort of what zone he's in at the time, and like that helps me understand, and how I have to deal with that situation. And it's, yeah, I love that. And like you said, I think the documentaries, where these athletes are coming out now and saying that, I think that's helping with the stigma, and really helping us all sort of go, oh wow, it's real and this is occurring. And even at the highest level, to see them, like we should be taking it more serious. So I love that.
Right. And then prioritizing like that your mental health is important. Like, for example, what's her name? The gymnastics that she took, she was in the competition for the gold, and
Simone Biles.
Simone Biles, she took off like last minute. I mean, the shame and the pressure around that. And she literally was like, I am not right. I'm not feeling right. And when your brain is not right, there's this brain body connection that your body's not going to do right. And that was so brave for her to actually just be, and there was a team on the line. There was a lot of things. And then you see now, like, what? Nothing happened. She came back 3 years later and was amazing. And that was the smartest thing, because she could have injured herself and ended her career right there and then. But like when you're in it, like I can imagine like the things going through her head. Like I find that action one of the bravest things I've ever seen. And to say that like it's it's a mental health thing. Like it's because they were like, Where's the injury? Like where's the
Mm,
broken foot?" And even in the olden days, the 80s, they made the athletes compete through the physical injuries. No, I mean the mental ones were not even acknowledged. But it would be like almost like going through with a broken hand and with your brain not right. And I mean, she was able to verbalize it in a ways like her brain wasn't connecting with her body, and like when she was saying like twist, her body wasn't twisting, but it was more like she was having a nervous breakdown basically. And she
yeah.
needed time for that. And she did the work and she came back stronger, and it's a great success story. But it was in the moment, I can imagine the pressure of like making that decision. It's almost like you're getting married and you're walking out on the aisle, like almost like that. The big the level of it, the hugeness of it. but she
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah, definitely very brave. Um, okay, so with your platform, Pediatrics Mum, what role does social media play in health advocacy?
Well, I think a lot of parents and a lot of young adults are getting their health information in social media, their news in social media. So it's important for us doctors to be there because there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, there's people, trying to sell products and trying to sell things and all kinds of things, even for mental health. Oh, you just take this gummy and you're gonna feel good. So it's not something that, we're there in it, like as doctors, we're not in it for any monetary gain. We're in it for educating the public. My target audience is parents of teens and mental health. So there's a lot of interest and there's also gaps. So in whatever way I can contribute to the evidence-based knowledge out there, for me is important because it actually contrasts the non-evidence-based information that's out there. And then also for teens, like the social media impact of on body image and negative body image is huge. So if that's where they're getting their information, then we need to be there, kind of counteracting that. So educating parents about what their teens are seeing in social media that could negatively affect them, and then educating parents and teens on the positive things that you can do to nourish your mental health. And it's a place where, where we need to be. So I'm glad you're there, and I'm glad I'm there.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I've looked through fair few of your posts, and I'm enjoying the content that I'm seeing, and I hope, yeah, I bet it's helping a lot of people. So yeah,
Thank you.
um, that's all right. So we've just announced here in Australia a ban on social media accounts like Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, and a few others for children up to the age of 16. So what do you think on
Amazing.
that?
I am so happy about that. I am so happy about that because I've seen the effects of unguided, misused social media. And even with the best of intents, let me tell you a story about a patient. 13-year-old got her cell phone as a birthday gift, the typical 13, you get the cell phone. And then, she was like, oh, I want to go on Instagram and Snapchat. Those were the two social media she was going to start using. And it was completely innocent. She started looking for healthy recipes to eat healthy. Okay. I look for those too. I actually cook out of Instagram. I have like a little folder where I save all the recipes and I cook. But she's 13 and her brain is not fully developed. And in Instagram, there's this thing where it's called the fitnessgram. So once you start looking for healthy eating recipes, the algorithm starts feeding you fitness. So I started feeding her all these influencers were like the thigh gap, and you need to measure, and carbs are bad and fats are bad, and maybe you're not hungry, maybe you're just thirsty if you drink enough water. And all of these messages literally got wired into her brain, and it was 3 months, and all of a sudden the parents noticed that she had lost so much weight. And when she came, she had lost 32 pounds. She was basically feeding herself on water, and she became vegetarian because also, animal meat is bad. And just like literally one, we diagnosed her with anorexia nervosa and eating disorder. And that, I mean, landed her in the hospital. She was at death's bed. She kept losing, and she told me, I cannot get these thoughts out of my brain. It's in it, and it's saying carbs are bad, fats are bad. And like every time I see this food, it disgusts me. So it literally got into her brain and wired it in a way that she was defenseless against and so vulnerable. And I felt so sad because like literally it wasn't like I'm gonna seek sex, I'm gonna seek drugs like what we imagine, right? Literally this was with the best innocent intentions, and she got fed this information. She didn't know this was happening. Her parents didn't know this was happening, and it happened. And it got her really, really sick. And it's just that's why Australia is basically ahead of the game. Like we are the ones that need to protect our kids. I love something that I saw Meghan Markle Saying in her campaign also with social media, where she was saying like when cars were invented, we were just like, oh, this is great technology. Let's go out driving. Let's go out with our families. Oh, road trip. And there was no seatbelts. People were just cramming in the car, right? And then
Mm.
years later, we realized the mortality rate and the accidents and people were dying after the studies came out. And then it's like, oh, maybe it would be a good idea to regulate and make people wear seatbelts. And I literally remember because this was in the 80s where they finally, I guess, in Panama, where I lived, they said now it's mandatory. And we were annoyed. Like, mandatory seatbelts? Why? Like, that's so uncomfortable. And then the car seats, right? But it is a proven strategy to decrease mortality in car use.
Yeah.
So why are we just going to hand this social media out to our kids without knowing the risks and the potential harmful effects, and then do the regulation? So we need to act fast because this is moving very fast, and especially even with AI. Now, I love having my assistant taking notes, but there was a child that fell in love with a bot and ended up taking his life.
With a
A
bot?
bot, AI. Yeah. Because the
Fell in love
bot,
with an AI bot.
yes, a 12-year-old. This happened in the US. So it's now not even social media. We have to go faster for the AI, but the social media we know. Like, I already can tell you the effects, and that's why Australia, I'm so glad. Maybe I will move there because I love these new laws. We need to do that here.
Yeah, sounds like it. Oh
Mhm.
God, the AI bots are terrifying. That's
Oh yeah,
scaring
look up
me.
that story. That happened. Yeah, because they start kind of like going with whatever your preferences or what you're telling them, and he really thought this was like I mean, he knew it was a bot, but you end up, every night he
Uh,
would go and chat with his bot, and then for some reason the bot actually told him to hurt himself. Because of some things he was saying, like but there was this, they're suing the app because it was an app where it wasn't so well controlled in terms of like the regulations for the responses and the access. A teen shouldn't have access to that chatting with a bot because it became sexual, it became many different things, and then it became an obsession. And then the child literally would do whatever the bot would say, and the bot ended up saying that. I don't know how that happened, but that's a whole different story for another day.
my God, that's terrifying. Oh
Terrifying.
wow. Um, all right.
So
So
kudos to Australia. Kudos to Australia for that ban. And kids are gonna be upset. I mean, with the Snapchat, they're gonna be upset. But there's a lot of risks there. I mean, even like with the location thing, it not only like for predators, like locating our kids, but also with the bullying and with the excluding of kids. Like, normally when we were teens, like, okay, they didn't invite me to the party. I barely found out. It's okay. I heard about it. I'm a little bit sad. But you are in the app seeing that all your friends are at that party and you're the only one that didn't get invited. How's that you're gonna be? That
yeah.
affects mental health. It's their brains are not fully developed to say, oh, well, they're so immature. They're probably dealing with their own trauma, and I'm good. I'm so cool anyways, even though nobody invited me to that party. No, you're gonna feel crushed,
Hmm.
heartbroken.
Yeah. It's one thing that terrifies me as well. Like, going back 10, 15 years when I was younger, um, we didn't have so much photographic technology. So, like with the phones being able to take photos and these apps being able to send them and so quickly as well. Honestly, like, and like you're saying about the frontal lobe taking so long to develop, the decision making at that age and for people to take a photo or be able to take a photo and instantly put that out there, that absolutely terrifies me because, yeah, like, they're not ready to make proper decisions and they are making mistakes and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So we need to talk about the things that can happen before they even happen because we know that they could. So there's some samples out there of like social media contracts, and it includes like you will not take pictures of things that you wouldn't like openly share and then share, because once it's out there, see ya. It's not your property anymore. People can do whatever they want with that picture. Um, and sometimes kids have shared things like in intimacy with, their girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, and then that gets blown out of proportion and it can crush someone. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
There's a lot out there to stay on top of. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what resources or practices would you recommend for youth athletes and their parents to strengthen mental well-being?
Okay, so basically, one of the things that they do recommend is staying away from screens, like at least an hour before a practice or a game, or a competition, because your brain really that cannot focus on like just tuning in with your body. So I feel mindfulness would be a really important tool to kind of start kind of sharing with your young athletes how to kind of like calm your body, kind of other tools that you can use like deep breaths and practicing that in moments that are calm. um Having like a bedtime routine where you kind of like share about the day and kind of express like anything that stressed you today, anything that was negative today, like trying to get out those negatives before bed to separate the day from the night, because the sleep quality is really important. So I would say to protect the mental health, I would say it's everything that you do to protect your body as well. So the nutrition is really important for the brain, like eating high quality foods and good amount of protein to sustain your body. And I mean, you're the expert on that. But basically, the nutrition is really important for the brain. Like if they're eating just carbohydrates, that's gonna be gone in an hour and they're gonna feel anxious. So kind of like getting some guidance on the nutrition piece. And then the sleep, making sure that that's enough or more. Athletes need more sleep because they're using their bodies so much more. So we want to make that sleep is quality. So kind of helping them make sure that from now, even if they're not having problems, they know what a bedtime routine is and how it should be. Like, we should be off screens at least 30 minutes before, and then maybe take a hot bath and relax the body, and then maybe talk about the things to offload those thoughts that could be stressful. Like if you wake up at night and you have thoughts about the day, that can make you have insomnia. So if sleep gets affected, mental health gets affected. So doing the things to build the blocks, let's just say. And then open channels of communication, like just using those times when you're driving your kids back and forth to really connect with them, to really ask and be curious about how they're feeling. And then that they know that, you know, we're here to support them, not to kind of, push them to the edge of exhaustion. We're here to support them in their passions and what they love. And this is a stage of exploring. And if they want to change sports, that's fine. If they want to, but it's important for them to always be active and move their body. Like even if you're not an athlete, like just to have something that you're doing always for fun, that's really important for your mental health. So like it goes both ways. And then
Yeah.
the resources, like maybe there's like an app that's helpful, like for meditations or mindfulness, or for putting an audiobook at night. And then maybe a mindfulness class, maybe some yoga that helps stretch your body but also calm your mind. So having built into your week some stress reducing activity. That's not watching a movie. That's what my kids would choose.
Yeah. Well, Netflix. What about reading? So reading to our children before bedtime. I feel it's a good thing. I love reading to my son. We're reading Harry Potter at the moment, so it's good. I'm enjoying that
Oh
journey again.
yeah, we were doing that last year. That's great. Yeah. That's a
If
great, yeah. So I always because we turning off the screens before sleep, so I said, well, you can read or we can read. And for many years, for example, my kids wanted me to read to them. So it's a good time for connection and also but a habit building. So they say like reading before bed, even for 6 minutes, calms down your nervous system much more than actually doing anything else. So reading, that's why some people are like, but when I read, I fall asleep. Well, that's great because it's obviously relaxing you in a way that you're falling asleep. So getting into the habit of reading before bed, either is like a parent reading to them or them reading themselves, is a great thing. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that one. And it
Okay.
creates that
Um, so what happens if they don't have a routine? If they didn't have a good sleep routine, or your child was getting to sleep really late, or yeah, we were mixed, like sometimes we were on par with our routine, or sometimes late. Would that have a negative effect there?
I think definitely, if it's a one-time thing or you're having practice late that day, kind of talking about it and being like, well, we're making this exception because there's this day that there's a late practice, but always talking about how sleep is so important and how many hours they should be getting. And yeah, kind of trying to see if like there's a day that you sleep late, hey, telling them like, hey, try to sleep a little bit more in the morning. Like if you wake up and it's still 7, try to sleep 1 more hour, like kind of like educating them in that way so they also can have some advocacy. But yeah, if it's a constant thing that's happening, they're not getting enough sleep, that's definitely gonna affect their performance and their mental health. So it should be something that should be addressed for sure.
Yeah, because I feel like children are always trying to push their bedtime. They're always trying to go a little bit longer, and trying to start
Hmm.
later. Especially like those early teen years, or most of their teen years actually.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really hard.
yeah. So I suppose, yeah, teaching them sort of what the benefits are and why they are going to sleep, and what they can get out of it. Um, and maybe showing examples, because like I like to show, like top athletes and stuff like that, and sort of say, look, he's saying he sleeps 14 hours a day, or this guy
Mhm.
naps all of the time. So maybe I guess we can use those role models to try and show that as well. Sort of like
Yeah.
Simone Biles example as well, like how she came out and spoke about her mental health. I suppose we can use role models in this place as well.
That's a great idea. Yeah, because they go more for peer things. Also, as you said, like if they have a coach or someone that they connect with, I my kids don't hear this podcast, but I talk to the coach on the sideline and tell him like, "Hey, can you talk about the importance of nutrition today when he comes to do the small trainings?" I was like, "This is something that they're struggling with. Like my child is struggling right now with getting enough protein." So of things that you do. Next time I'm like, can you talk about the importance of sleep, please? Things like that. So, having that person that that they really listen to, because sometimes teens don't listen to the parents, unfortunately. The teen years are rough because their brain development is set up for them to actually reject the parents' advice. So it has to be the motivational interviewing that we talked about, like helping them figure out, like, hey, how does sleeping 6 hours align with your goals of like really good performance in soccer? How do you feel your muscles feel when they don't get enough sleep? You
Mm,
can do it like that. The other flip side is they're younger. You have to be consistent and constant. It's like this is important. This is non-negotiable. Sleep is sleep. Um, and of course, having some flexibility, like on the weekends, you can go to sleep later as long as you're getting your full hours and then sleeping more in the morning, right? But for that, when there's little things like that that you feel like are falling off the track, finding that peer person that they peer or coach that they look up to, that they listen to, and having them hone that information in a subtle way.
mm, very good. Okay, so I've got 7 questions here, but our time sort of escaped us a little bit.
Yeah.
It's up to you. If you're short for time, we can call it here. But if you're
It's
good,
okay.
then
No, we can do them quick. Yeah. They're quick
yeah,
questions, right?
yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah, yeah, they definitely are. All right, so yeah, so I've just got 7 questions here to sort of finish off with. And the first one is, what is your favorite childhood sport or activity?
My favorite childhood sport was swimming, actually. I love swimming. I was in a team, but I also love dancing. So dancing was like my fun one, and my competitive one was swimming when I was growing up.
Oh, cool. Do you have like a specific dance style in Panama? Is like a type of dance
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Well, growing up, I was dancing like jazz, tap, and modern dance. So it's like the basics and ballet. So I was doing the four disciplines. But growing up, I like in my young adult years in med school, I was dancing like salsa, merengue, and bachata, which are like, couples dancing. And I even did competition when I was in med school with my boyfriend at the time. So we were like, those ballroom dancing style, but with the Latin
yeah.
of
How
dancing.
good.
I
Very
dance every
nice.
day.
Oh, lovely. So what's your go-to stress relief tip?
My go-to stress relief tip, start the day with affirmations and a meditation. So many people are starting their day now with the phone. You grab the phone. For kids and teens, my stress relief tip is all screens away from the room. But for me, for us as adults and parents, we have so much to tackle in the day that the way you start the day sets up your whole day. So the two things that I do is I have my alarm and it wakes me up with this meditation. 5 minutes is just like affirmations and like mindfulness. It's like a short meditation that I do while I'm still with my eyes closed, like I'm just asleep. It's the alarm. And then I always work out in the morning. Like even if it's a 10-minute, 15-minute short workout, like it sets up your day. Sometimes we don't have time. It can be some like a 10-minute stretch, but starting your day with moving your body is my stress relief tip because I really tackle everything better throughout the day when I've worked out, especially weightlifting or weight strength training is the best for really kind of like giving you those endorphins and calming down your nervous system. So even for my patients, I recommend exercise as medicine for them.
Yeah, very good. All right, so one book or documentary you think every patient should read or watch?
The book that I love for all parents is the book by Dr. Becky called Good Inside. That for me is a must. It's called Good Inside. It's about parenting and it just gives you a different perspective on like how kids' brains work and how to address difficult behaviors or that actually come from feelings. So it's a really must read
So what is
in my
that?
book.
GOAT? GOAT?
It's Good Inside. It's called Good
Oh,
Inside,
good inside. Yep.
like Good Inside, and it's by Dr. Becky. Um, I'll look her up. She calls herself Dr. Becky, but she's a psychologist specialized in parenting. Um, yeah. Good Inside. Yeah, Dr. Becky at Good Inside. So she has her website.
Cool. All right,
Yeah.
I'll definitely check that out. If you weren't a doctor, what career would you choose?
If I wasn't a doctor, probably a psychologist or therapist. That was what I had thought initially, but I also love cooking, and decorating. So maybe one of those, like, decorator or a chef. So those are the two things that I really enjoy.
Lovely. Um, okay, so favorite inspirational quote or mantra?
We can do hard things.
Yep, I would definitely
That's
can.
that I love because always when you're struggling and you're pushing through the last, it's like I can do hard things. I remind myself. Sometimes we forget.
Yeah, nice. Biggest lesson you've learned from your patients?
The biggest lesson is after the darkest night comes the brightest day. Because I've, been with my patients in the darkest moments where they feel like they're not gonna get through that and it's the worst time of their lives and their lives is done. I've had many patients that are thinking of ending their lives. And kind of share with them, hey, I've had many patients that have been here and there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I say that, but what if it's not true? But my patients have told me that it is true, because I have many patients that have gone through the darkest moments and they've seen the light and now they're happy and they're thriving. So this is what my patients have taught me.
That must be such a rewarding time for you, like, to see them through something like that and to experience that time where they've come out of it and to get that feedback from them. Like, yeah, that
Yeah.
must be great.
Yeah, it takes a while, but we get there.
So last question, one word to describe your passion for helping teens.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about the answer to that one. One word to describe my passion for helping teens. Life, life and joy. I want them to live life at the maximum of their potential and live it in a joyful way and know that happiness is possible. So, for them to live life, we need to get through these rough times and then, become the best versions of ourselves.
Beautiful. I think that's a good ending. Yeah, so thank you so much for stopping by. I very much enjoyed that chat. I could have chatted to you for hours nonstop. I'm sure I couldn't take that much of your time. But yeah, so if our listeners wanted to find you or to keep up to date with your work, how can they find you?
I think the best way is to follow me on Instagram because I'm putting all my content there. I am going to have a website that I will also share the content because I don't want to be solely on Instagram. But for now, it's all there on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on really on Facebook. So it's basically Instagram. I have my reels. I do interviews. I do some lectures, and I try to share it all there, and some posts with really good information that you can search through. But yeah, follow me on Instagram, Pediatrics Mom, and please comment and give me any questions that you have and content suggestions. I'm always happy to create more content with the things that people need to learn about.
Yeah, wonderful. I'll definitely put it in the show notes and I'll put something up on here so people can see it and can find you easily.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
That's all for today, guys. You can follow The Football Nutritionist on Instagram and X, and jump onto our blog at thefootballnutritionist.wordpress.com. Remember, keep fueling for success and kicking those goals.